Okay, so hopefully Ikra and Ruben can watch the recording. Just to summarize, from stand up, this is to kind of show people the new Plasmic workflow. If you have any kind of like front end functionality that you want to build, hopefully this makes things a lot easier. I refactored a lot of this stuff over the weekend. Let me start in code first because things are much cleaner now in terms of how it's separated. So in traditional React, so let's say hypothetically you wanted to build a new piece of functionality, like Javi. Javi wants to build billing. Billing is complicated. Billing has a lot of different components. Billing is going to require us pull in a lot of different libraries. What do? Traditionally in React, like presentation and logic is like tightly coupled. Like you have state in the component, and then that state might end up doing things like and have side effects. And I wanted to try to like break these things apart as much as possible. So we now have something called the OSO app client. So if you go to front end lib clients OSO app, we can reorganize this stuff later. There should be better places to put this stuff. There is now something like called the OSO app client. The idea behind the OSO app client is that like I just wanted to have a library where any kind of functionality that we would expect a user to do has a method in here, right? And it's quite simple. Literally, you construct it. Right now, we just construct it with a Supabase client, but in the future, you might construct it with like Stripe clients and stuff like that. The OSO client just does everything you would need to expose to the front end in some way. And feel free to chime in if anybody has any questions. So for example, I might want to get the current user. I want to get my current user profile. I might want to update my user profile. You'll notice that this is eventually, these are really simple because they're such like CRUD on Supabase, but it'll get more complicated as we do more things with Stripe, etc. But like anything that you want to expose, any kind of functionality that you want to expose to the front end is basically just the method in here. Create API key, get all of my API keys. These are clear, like you can visually map in your head where this exists in the front end. To delete an API key. And, this gives us the ability to also abstract out the functionality and change the behavior later, right? Like it just defines the contract between the front end and the front end library. So for example, right now today, oh, hold on, my speaker's going haywire. For example, like there was a time in our lives when we actually deleted rows. And now, for the most part, we're using the functionality of deleted at. So, when we, instead of deleting things, deleting rows, we actually just populate a deleted at column with the current date. And then we don't show anything with a deleted at column because that gives you the ability to undo, right? So these types of conventions, much easier to change without changing anything in Plasmic, right? We can change the behavior behind the scenes and change the semantics in this library. And this library is very tightly coupled with any kind of like Supabase migrations because obviously, if we change the behavior of any particular piece of functionality, we're going to have to potentially do some kind of Supabase migration to change that. So we can do all of this now without ever touching anything front end related, right? We can write the Supabase migration. We can change the behavior in the client. So here's all the stuff around organizations. Here's all the stuff around getting all the organizations that I'm a part of. Here, and then like, adding users. Eventually, we're going to have to add some kind of email invite claim flow. We can put all of that in here and test it. Changing user roles. Basically, any kind of functionality, whether read or read write, exists in here. Then there aren't very many tests right now. I'll add more tests today. That's part of what I want to do. But we can write end-to-end integration tests now, right, without ever touching the front end. So we can say, I can create multiple users. I can create multiple clients that reflect Alice and Bob with different OSO app clients. And then they can add each other and remove each other. That's the kind of test that I want to write today. And we do have like a setup that works now for local Supabase, right? So I can, there is documentation in our docs. If you go to docs, if you go to guides, if you go to ops, and you go to Supabase, I'm trying to document more and more like how we use Supabase. But you know, if you want to run a local Supabase instance, this is how you do it. If you want to reset your local state, this is how you do it. If you want to create migrations, I recently squashed all of our recent migrations, by the way, Javi, into a single file. So this is how you do it. I'm also doing this. So I actually do just straight up edit things in Supabase now, and then I retroactively create the migration and push it. It's just easier that way to go fully WYSIWYG. I know, lazy of me as a coder, but like I do that. This is like how you do that. The commands for creating, you know, diffs. Sorry, I don't know. I don't know if I went through that too quickly, but basically, traditionally, if you're not familiar with migration systems, I have to like write the changes that I want to make in a file and then push that up to remote. And now you have the ability to pull, right? So with Supabase, I can just change things in supabase.com, and then I can pull the diff down into a migration file that I check into code. And then you can squash it as well. So there's a lot of really cool tooling that exists for Supabase. All of that works. I use it now. We didn't used to use it before. We used to just edit things on production, like just push to production, but we do have a local flow now. But I'm going to try to update this local ops guide more often just to reflect our own current practices. Okay, back to testing. So I want to see a world where we actually test functionality, right? It used to be the case that anytime I implemented functionality, I would have to implement it to the front end, and then I would manually be testing flows. But now every flow should exist in code. So if I create an organization, add a user, remove a user, check the permissions, check that they have the ability, check that they are blocked from seeing certain things if they're a certain role, like all that kind of stuff, we should write as tests, which we never used to do before. But you know, it's all set up for that now. Let me take a pause, see if anybody has any questions on this, because this is like, this doesn't touch React at all. This is 100% TypeScript library plus Supabase, period.
That seems really nice. It's something that I really appreciate, because when I have to like, as you said, React state and functionality is really tangled to the component. So I felt that when we were using Plasmic before, we had to do a lot of hooks and create a lot of like context and hooks and everything. So it's pretty nice for it to be abstracted here, for it to be able to be tested in one place. So I think that this will actually give us a lot of speed. And yeah, I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. Thanks. No, I like it as well. It gives us the ability to create like a front end SDK, right? So in the future, if we want to release like a OSO SDK library or something, we have so many libraries now, but like something that reflects an OSO user or OSO client, you can wrap this, and then people can make other front ends for it, right? Like we could embody this functionality and bring it over to Kariba Network or something like that. It's pretty abstract. Okay, so how do I expose this to the front end now? Now we have like a bucket of methods in a class where I can create all sorts of functionality. How do I expose that to an actual visual interface? There's two new components. One component is called OSO Data Provider. This is a component that I would use if I have something that I want to visually show in the front end. And so that I'll show you how to use that in a second in Plasmic. This is the code, but honestly, you're never really going to have to touch this. Assuming there's no bugs, which never happens. And then there's OSO Global Context. OSO Global Context gives me the ability to store a single global context in the entire Plasmic app. So, and there's two reasons why I want that. One reason is because I want to register actions. So, updating my user profile, creating an API key, deleting an API key, creating organization. These are all actions that I want to expose into Plasmic, and I want to attach to a button or something like that. So if you have something like that, you do actually have to register it here. So there's there's two places where you have to register it. I know this is a little messy right now. There's this OSO Global Actions object, which you basically just pass in, what methods should be callable from Plasmic. This only matters for write actions. It doesn't matter for read actions. And then you have to map it, which is kind of annoying. So I have to actually do the call to my client. Hopefully this is just like, copy and paste in the future, but there might be a cleaner way to do this in the future. But let me show you what that looks like. Let me think if there's anything else I want to say in code. Last thing I want to say in code, if you go back to the OSO client, one of the things that you might have noticed is that anytime I have parameters, I pass parameters in as a single JSON object, and every key in that JSON object is optional. If you guys aren't familiar with TypeScript, what partial does is it basically turns every single key into something that is optional. It could be null, it could be undefined, but it could be a string. And the reason why that matters is because when I'm in Plasmic, well, there's no like enforcement right now or type enforcement in Plasmic. So if I pass in an empty object in code, I have to be like ready for somebody doing it incorrectly and passing in an empty object. So I have to do some amount of validation. So for example, here, this ensure function call will just make sure that the key ID exists. If it doesn't, it'll throw an error saying that key ID is missing. And again, it's because the interface between Plasmic and the library is a little imprecise right now. And there's no way in Plasmic for me to say, for sure, somebody will pass in a key ID. It's possible somebody forgets to put in a key ID and then I need to throw an error. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. So any kind of parameters are always in this convention of like a single args a JSON object where every key is optional, basically. But you can pass in that you can always return stuff, and that's fine as well. Okay, let's go to Plasmic now because I think this is where stuff gets really juicy. So what does this look like when I'm in Plasmic? So I'm going to break it down into two different types of actions. One type of action is just a read-only action. Sorry, one type of thing that you want to do is a read-only thing. One type of thing that you want to do is a read-write thing. So let's do the read-only thing first because that's easier. Let's go into something like the profile page. Here's my profile page. And anytime you want data to be visible, it needs to be wrapped in this OSO data provider because it is the thing providing the data. And how do I tell it what data I want? Well, you should first give it a variable name. This is a global name in a global context. So I'll call it something like OSO profile. 99% of the time, I want to use test data. If I set this tag, if I check use test data, Plasmic is smart enough to remove all the test data stuff before I build in production. So I can leave this check mark on. Don't worry, that won't automatically get propagated to production. But I almost always want to check mark this because when I'm in the Plasmic Studio, I'm not actually logged in as any user. So I actually have to pass in some test data so that I can actually render things and style it correctly. So what comes from this should be what you expect to come from. It's just a pass through, right? So anything that I'm calling, this is just like a static snapshot of data that I might see. And in this case, the data is this profile object that I'm getting from get my user profile. And the way that I say what data that I want is determined in this data fetches object. And unfortunately, this is just a convention right now. It's pretty ugly in my opinion, but it's better than nothing. The convention is it's a JSON object. And the reason why I have a generic JSON object is because you might actually want to do multiple function calls. And I might be over-engineering. I'm almost positive I'm over-engineering here. But this key is an arbitrary key, an arbitrary string that just gives it a name for where I want to store the data. Then I say what method I want to call, get my user profile. There's nothing in my arguments. But I could also in here say like, I could give a second key and I can say also fetch, I don't know, like orgs or something like that, and then get like my organizations or something like that. So the reason why I did it this way is it might be the case that you actually want one data provider to do multiple calls on your OSO app client and then return the data to me keyed by different things. And if I have different keys, then I also have to come back in, and in my test data, I also have to, provide fake data for the second call that I just made, right? And then this should actually be populated with the test data from my data fetch. Does that convention make sense? Any questions so far? I probably should come up with a better user interface, but
it makes sense. But I have one question. So since it has to be sent as JSON, this assumes everything is serializable, so you have to, we cannot do like complex compositions, passing functions, hierarchy functions. So that's a limit that Plasmic has, right?
No, actually. So the way to think about Plasmic is Plasmic just generates React. So anything in here is actually just React code. And so if I pass in functions, I should actually be able to access them in Plasmic.
So imagine, for example, that I have like a parent container with user state or something, and I want to propagate that to childs. Using your data fetcher or something, can I add, for example, a lazy callback, or it doesn't work that way?
Yes, you can, actually. Let me show you an example of that. I'm glad you asked. It's a good question. So in OSO data provider, for example, right now, this is a crude example, but Javi, I think it'll make sense to you. Currently, I use SWR for caching and revalidation. And you can trigger revalidations with this mutate function, right? I don't know if you've done that before.
Yes.
If I call mutate with no parameters, it will force SWR to recall it again. And this mutate function, you'll notice here, where did I put it? Here, when I pass the data into data provider view, I give it the data, but I also pass in the mutate function. And then I can call that mutate function from Plasmic. So let me show you an example of this. Today, let's go to the members page, for example. The members page, I want to invite people, right? So, okay, actually, sorry. I haven't showed actions yet. Let me show actions now, and then I'll show you how that revalidate function is called. Actions, the way that global actions work is, remember, you have to register it here in the OSO global context. Once you register your action in the OSO global context, it'll pop up now. So let's say this invite button. This invite button is just a button, but I can come down here and add an interaction, an on-click interaction. And you'll notice there are actually 3 actions that run back to back. And so the first thing that I do is I invoke a global action. This action I had just registered in Plasmic. So I want to add user to organization by email. You'll notice everything in my global context is accessible to me here, right? So I want to add user to organization by email. These are the arguments. The arguments are dynamic. So I am getting the email from this input field. I am getting the org ID from my path parameters. And then right now I'm just hard coding it as admin, but in the future we can change that, obviously. And so I'll do 3 things. I want to insert into my Supabase by calling the OSO app client. When that's done, I want to close the modal. So I update the state of my modal to closed. So the modal will automatically close. And then I want to run code. Now remember, Javi, this revalidate function was something that I passed in to the data provider. So because this button is underneath the OSO app data provider, I can come in, this context OSO members comes from here, right? I named the context variable here OSO members from the data provider. So because this button is underneath OSO app provider, I can write arbitrary JavaScript, and I would not recommend writing a lot of JavaScript. Like small amounts of JavaScript is okay, but don't write too much JavaScript in Plasmic. I can go to OSO members. This read at validate function exists. And if I switch the code, I can just call it. I'm going to cancel, but hopefully that explains it. So it's not strict JSON. It's anything you can do in React. Any questions? Does that make sense?
That makes sense. That answers my questions. Okay. Really powerful.
Really powerful. Yeah. So let me show you what that looks like now. So demo time. This is in production now. I can log in. I think you guys know this already. But if you log in as a non@karibalabs.co address, you'll see nothing. You can still edit API keys down here, but this is empty. But if I sign out and then I come back with a Kariba Labs account, actually, yeah, let me show you where that is right now. Layout, app layout. Here, where should I put it? No, it's in left pane. Left pane is this thing. I think it's this one. Yeah, no. This one. Yeah. So you'll notice this box is hidden, and it's hidden if the user's email does not end with, at Kariba Labs. So it's kind of a cheap way to do feature flagging right now. Anyway, so now, hello, organizations. So let's create the OSO organization. So OSO is here now. I can invite you guys. So let's say I'm going to invite Carl at karibalabs.co. Let's say I have a typo. Okay, so we need to improve some of the error handling and stuff. This is me late last night, just wanting to get things over with. The error handling is terrible. I'm fully aware of that. We should fix that. But let's say you type in the correct email address. It shows you a little snack bar that says done, and you'll notice that this revalidate function, when it's called, will automatically refresh the data that's in this data provider because I called revalidate. If I didn't call revalidate, it would just show my name, and then I'd have to manually refresh to see Carl's name. Does that make sense? Just trying to show it end to end. Any questions so far? So what I want to do this week with y'all is, with Javi, translating what this means concretely, it's like, okay, in my OSO client now, let's start implementing the functionality that I expect, right? Like get my credits, or top up credit. I don't know, whatever you want to call it, right? Like let's start making the functionality that you would expect a user to be able to do in this client. Similarly for Ikaro, hopefully you can watch this after the fact. Ikaro should be very familiar with this because he's very familiar with Plasmic. You want to add dynamic data connectors. You want to remove dynamic data connectors. All that functionality we implement in here. Hopefully all of us can help implement more tests to make sure that we're doing things correctly, so we can add more tests. Feel free to break up the tests into different, describes or whatever. Once you've implemented your functionality, anything that's read-only is automatically exposed in the data provider. Anything that's read-write, you have to add it to this global actions registry, right? So now we have this view my credits and top up credits. So top up credits is the only one that I would need to put in here in the OSO global actions. And then together, we can come in here and start, the way that my workflow would go is I would implement the functionality first. I would write tests. I guess in parallel, in theory, somebody can start creating this page because it's hidden anyway, right? So I can, delete this and I can start adding a bunch of stuff in traditional, Plasmic style. I can do all of this mockups with fake data and just plug in the data later, right? So sorry, this is like a crude demo. Super ugly. I don't know, whatever. Okay, I'm just making stuff up here. But like we can start in parallel designing what we want this page to look like. And then once you've pushed the library to production, then this Plasmic Studio is set to automatically pull any components that have been registered properly in production. So once the library has been pushed up to production, you can reload the studio and then start adding dynamic functionality here. So I can eventually wrap the data provider. I can add a function call in here for my credits, view my credits, and then I can start populating, what this looks like. But that would be my general workflow is like, eventually we'll hire a designer who can work on this mock page in parallel. Meanwhile, an engineer is working on the functionality. And then later you marry the two, right? And so once you push the component up to production, then you start plumbing stuff up together. That's mostly it. Let me see if anybody has any questions. Okay. No questions. Easy peasy, I guess. So yeah, short-term thing, like Javi, if you want to take ownership over the billing page, or I can, there's also like live edit. You can, like Google Docs, we can edit this together at the same time. We can just like set up a half an hour to just kind of mock out what we want to see. Same thing with the connections page. Right now there is, again, this is just dummy stuff. So just what we can wipe all of this out and then like start adding the ability to view what my private data connections are and the settings and stuff like that. We can start mocking all of that out with Icaro. Meanwhile, we can build functionality and plumb it up together. I'm hoping this just starts accelerating what we do on the front end. So yeah. Cool.
Sounds good.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Ray.
All right. If that's it, I'll close this out and
Yeah, just share the recording in the team chat or something so that Icaro and Ruben can catch it. All right, bye.
Ciao, ciao.